G'day, A.J. Mahari here. I'm going to be responding to another comment because I think that what a lot of people share and in different ways can maybe help to, if I respond, can maybe help to help the commenter, but also other people who can relate to what the commenter might be sharing. So a person commented to the short I did, do borderlines feel your love? And I know that this is contentious for a lot of people, but I think maybe more toward moving through the relationship and or realizing you're at the breakup or the discard or the ghosting to discard part of a huge devaluation split helps people to start, maybe if they come by and hear this, it helps people to really start to understand what I've been talking about for a long time about how people with BPD really can't feel your love, really don't feel love for you because it's a failure of othering in borderline personality disorder. So that the difference between self and other is not really well understood emotionally. It's understood maybe intellectually, but not emotionally by people with BPD. So we have largely people who have codependency in relationships with people that have borderline personality disorder. And this commenter, well, let's just get into it because what it is why are you contacting your ex? Why did this commenter contact his ex? And what can you expect when you do that? And then how do you frame that given the reality of some people with codependency still not realizing their own responsibility, which has nothing to do with the borderline did, and many people with codependency not yet taking full personal responsibility for themselves, their well-being, what happened to you, and how do you now start to focus on you instead of obsessing on the borderline. And so to what end is it helpful in the way that this commenter, if you can relate to this or for any other reason, contacted his ex? Okay, so that's kind of the gist of what this is about. So the first comment they left on that short that I did, do borderlines, quote, feel, unquote, love for you? The commenter says they love you so much that they can't tolerate it when you don't reflect it back to them every time they capital need it. They then do something completely unloving because they didn't get what they wanted. Okay, well, this can be very true. But the thing is, how can they do something very unloving because this person's perception is that they didn't get what they wanted, so they're going to do something very unloving? Well, when you're making the contact, when you're reverse hoovering your ex, you really have to think about, like, not only why are you doing that, and the urge and the desire and from all the pain that might cause you to do that, but you're ignoring and abandoning yourself again when you contact an ex, and especially when you're not even contacting to get back with them. However, I think a lot of people think and rationalize, a lot of people with codependency think and rationalize that, well, I'm just going to tell them this, or I'm just going to do that, or I'm working on closure, which you're not going to get from them, and that's, you need to go no contact. But all these iterations of reasons that codependents will rationalize to themselves when really it still has a lot to do with just not being finished, not being fully in your own healing recovery journey, not turning that corner to go full no contact and to really take care of yourself, because it's very, very painful. So that's what the commenter said. And when I first saw this comment, I couldn't tell if they were being sarcastic or not, because, some people are. It's harder to read in text, but I think maybe they weren't being sarcastic. I did say something about, I had a brief comment back about how they don't have needs, if they don't have that, sort of like identity they're seeking through you reflected back, they're left needing more. Could that be a reason for them to respond in a triggered way and be meaner? Yeah, it could be, but let's see what this commenter actually experienced and what happened. After the first comment, let me just read that again really quickly. They love you so much, speaking of borderlines, right, that they can't tolerate it when you didn't reflect back to them every time they capital need it. Then they do something completely unloving because they didn't get what they wanted. I guess the other point I'd like to bring up here is I don't think this person with codependency with the BPDX got what they wanted either in this communication that they reverse Hoover to have, communication that is not recommended. So there's that, and so it's like, so neither person got what they wanted. So is the whole reaction only on the borderline? Well, not really, but some people with BPD can take those reactions and ratchet them up so much that, yeah, then the codependent responsibility factor for the contact starts to really look minimal in comparison to the borderline reaction. I'm not sure we have this with this comment here, with this example. So, I'm talking not only to the commenter, but to anybody that could relate to this. So the commenter in the second comment said, perhaps my best example of that. I remember I began an interaction, exchanged some very short messages, back and forth 3 times in a few minutes. And this is somebody who says it's their ex. They're getting much better. Doesn't mean they're not getting much better in their codependency and relationship recovery. But they texted, so they began the interaction with their BPDX, exchanged some very short messages back and forth 3 times in a few minutes. That's still kind of like rather intense, and it's not full no contact, is it? She was talking in a very entitled, passive-aggressive way, as if she's been angry. I haven't messaged her all day. Well, and that could be true, and sometimes people with codependency can maybe misperceive the reason that they're not getting responded to, especially when you consider these two, by accounts of this commenter, are exes now. So she was talking in a very entitled, passive-aggressive way, says the commenter, as she's been angry. I haven't messaged her all day. Now, could be true, might not be true, right? Just saying. And the commenter says, I was trying to have some healthy distance because we broke up a month before this. Okay, what does that really mean? It's kind of code speak for, I don't feel very done. I need something else. I need closure. I want to try to get heard and understood more. I want the borderline to know how much they affected me, turned my life upside down, or broke me. All these different things. But he's recontacting her after they broke up. So what are his expectations? So they broke up a month before this, and he's approaching her for this interaction. See, this is what codependents really need to learn not to do. This is why going no contact, full no contact, is so important. And I'm out here to work with you if you would like to, if you resonate with me and you would like to work on this and get yourself into no contact and moving forward through a healing recovery journey. Commenter says, I stopped replying after saying I was fine. She then said sent one more message that I opened, which was something as simple as like, oh, okay. Okay, so whatever happened, and then he said he was fine, and she said, oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure we could call that like really mean behavior. I don't know. What do you think? After 30 minutes go by, I open my phone again. I see she blocked me with absolutely no explanation. They're already broken up. They're already exes. Why would this commenter feel that he's owed any explanation? Next day, so not bad enough, that experience. Commenter not realizing their codependency and their responsibility in this as well. Next day, let's try it again, because they're broken up. And what is this commenter trying to achieve? Next day, I text her on another platform. I ask if she's okay. And the commenter put in brackets, rescuing behavior, I know. Well, you know what? It's really not rescuing behavior. It's something in the codependent commenter that he's wanting and projecting out like the borderline wants it, but he's the one making all the contact and seemingly not prepared to take responsibility for that. So next day I texted her on a platform. I ask if she's okay, rescuing behavior, I know. A little bit more than that, actually, in this case. She says she's mad at me because, quote, I obviously wanted to talk to you, unquote. In brackets, apparently I have to read her mind now. But he volunteered to re-engage in this. Have you been there? Are you thinking about going there? In terms of not being no contact, can you relate to this at all in whatever iteration of this you may have gone through, or still be elongating your own pain and suffering by recontacting, rehoovering your BPDX? And then he goes on, apparently I was being mean and she was not going to be, quote, effed about with, unquote, even though she was effing me about. Okay, so when the codependent commenter recontacts the already clearly ex in the relationship, they are broken up. He does the reverse Hoover for what reason? And then he says that the person with BPD, his ex that he contacted, is effing him about. I don't see that here. Even though she was, effing him about. So she said she was not going to be effed about with, even though she was effing about with the commenter says. But really, wasn't it more like the commenter was effing around about the ex BPD? I don't know. What do you think? And that she was trying to, quote, show that I cared with her ever so caring and considerate behavior. Well, let's just get really real here for a minute. How considerate is it of a codependent who's broken up and the ex of a person with BPD to be hoovering them back for what purpose, but certainly not out of care or rescuing behavior? This is about this commenter's codependency and whatever his own reasons were to want to interact not only one time, but then following up texting the next day. And this is at least a week or more after they broke up. So how much is this one on the person with BPD versus this one's on the person with codependency? Because I don't really hear that there's anything really untoward or super mean coming from the BPDX. Just to keep it real, just to look at it in a different perspective, because everything isn't always about the borderline. Lots is. But where's the codependent responsibility if you're going to reverse Hoover and then you don't like what you get? And then you're trying to figure out, well, they're mad because they didn't get what they wanted, but yet you started the Hoover interaction. So she was apparently trying to show, quote, that I cared with her ever so caring and considerate behavior, which, I think that's sarcasm. But how considerate is, and you might say, well, you don't have to be, but how considerate is this commenter, the codependent ex of this person with BPD, being in engaging interaction again for what is clearly his own purposes, right? So why shouldn't a person with BPD kind of be like a little bit feeling effed about by that? Commenter goes on, rather than apologizing, she said, you should have communicated that and I would have understood. To which I took accountability and said, sorry, I didn't realize it made her feel that way. Well, again, we don't make people feel anything. Nobody makes me feel anything. I don't make anybody else feel anything. We have our own reactions, perceptions, maybe cognitive distortions, whatever, that leaves us feeling a certain way after somebody maybe says or does A, B, C, but this person with codependency doesn't understand that he can't make her feel a certain way. Because whether or not she can the BPDX can take responsibility for how she actually feels isn't the responsibility of the codependent ex hoovering his borderline ex. I didn't realize it made her feel that way. Yeah, well, you didn't make her feel anyway. She just felt how she felt. And sometimes people with BPD, in spite of everything, when they feel a certain thing, when you're reverse hoovering them, they can sometimes just be... they're not always mean. This person doesn't sound like they're being mean. They're just trying to kind of hold the person with codependency and the ex a little bit more accountable. And he actually apologized, but then thinking he made her feel a certain way. And he said, I said I will try to be clearer in the future. Why should there be a future of communication between this codependent borderline ex and his borderline ex when he's the one initiating all this contact? What is this about? Can you relate to this? What is this like for you? Are you struggling to stop communicating to your borderline ex, no matter if they receive your communication, ignore your communication, or really treat you badly? This seems like rather benign, really. But it's a whole lot of involvement over what and for what reason or reasons. I don't think anything positive can come out of this, and in particular for both parties, actually. So the commenter said, I'll try to be clear in the future. There should be no future of interaction between this codependent commenter and the BPD-X. And then the commenter continues, I explained it using Jade, as AJ brings up often. Jade is not something that's ever recommended. Jade is not a communication strategy. Jade is not a communication modality with a person with BPD. Jade is when the person with BPD sets you on your back foot through all kinds of maybe illogical behavior, just stonewalling your attempts to talk about any specific thing. So then Jade is when you justify, argue, defend, and explain. Sounds like this commenter did explain to his BPD-X that he contacted because they're broken up. He used Jade. Well, Jade is not effective to use. You end up justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining. And that's the epitome of what codependents end up doing when people with BPD aren't hearing you. They aren't feeling love for you in the relationship, let alone when you're broken up and still going back to the ex for communication for some reason. I don't really know why this communicator was motivated to do this. I mean, the commenter, sorry. So no, I don't bring up Jade like it's a modality, a method, or a strategy that you should talk to your BPD-X with. Not at all. And then the commenter says, I shouldn't have to explain myself, but you contacted her. And maybe it was very unclear to her what you were fishing around for. So you see, codependents have responsibility in these reverse Hoovers. And then, well, if you're going to talk to a BPD-X, what do you expect you're going to get? How do you think it's going to be different? This is the codependent repetition compulsion cycles of trying to get, this commenter was trying to get something from the BPD-X. So he's talking all about what the BPD needs to have reflected to them, but so do the codependents need to have a lot of validation from outside of self. And it seems like this commenter might well have been trying to get some validation about something by contacting and reverse hoovering on 2 separate days his ex, because after all, she doesn't love him and can't tolerate when he doesn't reflect back what she needs. You see, there's codependent overlap with BPD. It doesn't mean codependency is BPD, but that overlap is showing here because this person with codependency hoovering their ex. Can you relate? Can you hear this when I say this? It's difficult. But if you're doing that, you can relate to what this commenter did. You're seeking something from the borderline ex. You're seeking some validation. You're seeking something. And so people with codependency have to take responsibility for that, I would suggest. And moreover, be able to go no contact and stop reverse hoovering your ex and then thinking your ex is doing all this horrible stuff to you. Some of them may well be. This one doesn't sound like they actually did. And then when the commenter says, I shouldn't have to explain myself, why not? Why not? Just because the other person has borderline personality disorder and is your BPD-X, you hoover them, there's confusion happening in the communication, this commenter is not getting what he wants, and then he says, but why should I have to explain myself? Last I checked, codependents and borderlines are not exactly the same, but in the trauma bond relating, so many people with codependency think they're above the borderline. Maybe in many ways you are. But thinking you shouldn't have to explain yourself when you're the one that started the interactions? What is this commenter? What do you think? Have you ever done this? What is the motivation? What is this commenter seeking? Because he's not just communicating to his ex for his ex's sake. Is he maybe in denial about that? So after he said I shouldn't have to explain myself, commenter said she followed my explanation by, quote, it is what it is, let's end this, unquote. Sounds pretty reasonable to me, actually, it does. Even though it's coming from someone with BPD, it sounds like they're holding their ground. They're not the one that's doing hoovering. The codependent ex is reverse hoovering this person with BPD. So when she said it is what it is, let's just end this, that's probably pretty appropriate at that point. And then, of course, the commenter experiences that and says, being dismissive, not validating my view. Why would your borderline ex, why would you expect him to validate your view when you're broken up and you keep contacting and reverse hoovering her? She had been, a commenter continues, she had been communicating she didn't really want a relationship any longer since we broke up because she didn't know how to be in a relationship. Some pretty honest communicating from a person with borderline personality disorder that this commenter did not accept, has not accepted, probably feels some abandonment from, and so what's he reverse hoovering her for now? So she actually said she'd been communicating she didn't, he said, she'd been communicating she didn't really want a relationship any longer since we broke up because she didn't know how to be in a relationship despite wanting my attention as if she's entitled to it. Okay, well, maybe there's something to that. I wouldn't know. But in this comment, it's the commenter reverse hoovering the borderline ex who seems to be wanting all the attention, who seems to be feeling entitled to the want of the attention that they're seeking in reverse hoovering their BPDX. See, it's not always about the borderline, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not saying for anything that this person with BPD might have done to hurt this commenter with codependency. That's important. Of course it is. But right now, that's not what's happening in this interaction as it's being, as it was written here. So she's been communicating she doesn't want to be in a relationship. They broke up. She doesn't know how to be in a relationship, which is pretty aware for a person with BPD. But he keeps on reverse hoovering and wanting to interact with her. He's not getting validated what he wants. And then he's projecting that out onto, well, she's not getting validated what she wants, so she's saying this stuff to me. And I tried Jade, which is not a methodology of communication that, that's healthy. And then he's like, I shouldn't have to explain myself. This is really when codependence can run amok and then turn it around, project it out, blame it all on the borderline. In a situation like this, I'm not saying that's what happens in the relationships or that people with BPD don't indeed really injure people with codependency, but I don't really read that in this comment, that that's the situation. And then the commenter ends with, how on earth is that loving someone? They've got the idea of love completely inside out. It's bizarre. Really? What do you think about this? And if you are somebody with codependency and you have a BPDX, you might want to take this man's side, but how on earth is that being loving to someone? He's saying about his BPDX that he reverse hoovered when she said she doesn't want a relationship because she doesn't know how to do a relationship, and they're broken up. So then, where does it come from, this codependent man? How on earth is that loving someone? So see, he's still trying to be loved by his borderline ex. This is about what he needs. This is about the validation he wanted as a codependent in reverse hoovering a BPDX. And of course, you're not going to get what you need, right? You didn't get it in the relationship. And so then he says, they've got the idea of love completely inside out. It's bizarre. I don't see that here. Could something have happened in the relationship prior where that would have been true? Yeah, likely. But in this interaction, what the commenter is describing, they got the idea of love completely inside out. It's bizarre. Well, I don't, the BPDX didn't hoover him and say, hey, I love you and whatever. And then that happens a lot, right? And it's bizarre because they can't follow through. But this is in a case where the codependent, as I said, reverse hoovers and contacts and tries to interact with a BPDX who doesn't seem to want to do that anymore. And that would be kudos to somebody with BPD actually being a little bit aware and saying, hey, we're broken up. I can't do this relationship. So how is it in this circumstance, because I would say it's not at all, that the person with BPD is somehow being bizarre and not in a position where they're trying to say anything about loving this person anymore? So Commenter's last comment, how on earth is that loving someone? Why is the codependent ex of this person with BPD expecting to be, quote, loved or heard by this person that he is intruding upon with reverse Hoovers, who clearly is saying, let's just end this relationship? Which, when a person with BPD says that and says they don't want to be in the relationship because they can't be in a relationship, that's pretty friggin' responsible for a person with BPD. So what is this person with codependency doing? Because he's creating his own drama. He's obviously reached out, reverse Hoovered the BPDX for his own reasons. Codependents do this often. Can you relate to this? Can you be honest enough with yourself to know that you've done this? I have had many clients talk to me about this issue, where they can't stop contacting the ex, and the ex isn't doing anything to them anymore, no matter what the relationship was like. But of course you're in a lot of pain after these breakups, right? But I just don't see this codependent reverse hoovering his BPDX making a whole lot of sense here, because I think this is his responsibility. I think he was looking for something from the borderline ex, not the other way around. He's projecting out that she should have somehow been different when she's clearly saying, let's just end it. I don't want to have a relationship because I can't do a relationship. That's pretty honest. You don't get that from every person with BPD. So anyway, I'll just read it again. He says, how on earth is that loving someone? Why should it be? You broke up, you're broken up, you're the ex, reverse herbing the borderline, who's actually seemingly a little more mature about what's happened between the two of you now that it's over. And this codependent man doesn't seem to understand that he shouldn't just be feeling entitled, actually, as a codependent, to keep reverse hoovering his BPDX. What's he looking for? He's obviously the one looking for the validation from the person with BPD and not vice versa in this situation, as what was shared here. And then they've got the idea of love completely inside out. It's bizarre. Well, I think it's a little bit bizarre when, not to judge, but I think it's a little bit bizarre when people with codependency think that they have the entitlement to hoover back the ex whenever they want, but that the ex shouldn't do that, or if the ex isn't doing that, then, you know, what does any of it have to do with love? But my other point is, really to drive home here, this is an example, I mean no disrespect to the commenter, of how codependents can really get themselves into situations where they might not yet realize consciously that they've always been seeking something from the borderline, and that people with codependency seek external validation in certain areas and whatnot, maybe not as often or as much as most people with BPD or in the same ways. Clearly what the commenter was doing here, clearly this commenter then saying, how on earth is that loving someone, when his expectation at this point, because they're broken up, from his BPDX of being loved is totally his issue now. Because whatever happened in the relationship is one thing, but his recontacting, hoovering, when she's clearly saying, we're broken up, I'm done. It's not even that she's being mean. Many people with BPD, if you hoover them after the breakup or whatever, they can be very mean and worse. But I don't see that here. So I think that this commenter kind of is an example for many people out there who might relate to this, that if you're the codependent, you're the BPD, you're the ex of the person with BPD, and you keep reverse hoovering them, and they're saying whether they're mean to you or not, that's not justified, right? But why would you continue to do it if somebody's being mean to you? Why would you say that, you know, people with BPD, well, you know, in this, it's true. But why would you say, if encountering a person with BPD being as responsible as this one was in their communication, as reported by the BPDX, the codependent, who keeps on interacting because he feels entitled to just reverse hoover the BPDX? What is he looking for? What do you think? And can you relate to this? And I say this with no judgment, but I'm calling out gently and with compassion the reality that so many people with codependency need to learn so much more about. Yes, these relationships can, it doesn't sound like this was like that, but relationships can break up on a dime where you don't understand and you're in a world of hurt. And the fact that you don't understand BPD in the beginning and you're still working to maybe understand it, really hard to explain why people with BPD just can't do relationships. But yet here's a person with BPD saying, just let's end this. I can't be in a relationship because I don't know how to do a relationship. And then the codependent BPDX is reverse hoovering and still pushing, and then somehow projects that it's the BPDX that is seeking validation, and how unloving is all of this. And this commenter was really wayward in using, as they said, they used Jade to try to communicate with the BPDX, who clearly is not in mean ways, but is saying, I really don't want to talk to you. We are broken up. I can't do this. Let's end this. And it's the codependent that's pushing, not accepting that, and then saying you use a Jade. Use Jade. Jade isn't something you use, justify, argue, defend, and explain. It usually happens in response to people with BPD that are, stonewalling your attempt to actually discuss something that just happened, or something in a relationship or whatever that just happened that just hurt you. And then you end up justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining, instead of the person with BPD listening to you, hearing you, taking in what you're saying, and maybe then being responsible in discussing it with you, which a lot of people with BPD can't do that. So this is a little bit puzzling, and I wonder why the person who wrote the comment doesn't seem to realize that right now, as per this comment, they are the one, the codependent man is the one, seeking validation in something from a borderline X who doesn't want really to talk anymore because she reiterates they're broken up. And then he thinks he shouldn't have to explain himself. See how this can go, and it can be way worse than this situation, but I'm sure it's very hurtful for this man. The thing is, though, this is where codependents have to start learning more about codependency and what are you doing and why are you doing it? How you're using it as escapism, why are you still obsessed with the ex? You're saying the ex did this, that, or this man that doesn't know how to love, and they need, and if you don't mirror back what they need, they get really angry. And yet in this case, it's reverse. It's the BPDX codependent getting angry or feeling hurt and or whatever else because he's reverse hoovering the borderline X because what he's looking for isn't being mirrored back to him. People with codependency, you're not responsible for what a person with BPD does or for how the relationships often blow up. They just ghost, discard, etc. But you do have responsibility if you're re-engaging, getting hurt, then you want to blame the borderline, who in this case wasn't rude or mean, and then that condescending tone that this commenter used towards the BPDX that I shouldn't have to explain myself. Well, yeah, if you're reverse hoovering a BPDX who can calmly tell you it's over, I can't do this relationship because I can't do relationships. In other words, kind of leave me alone, like I'm over here doing my own thing. Are you somebody out there with codependency that still wants to hoover back your BPDX? And whether they're like this person, I think this person, their BPDX was using reasonable language and not being mean, because the X is still looking for validation and more, dare I say, even love or consideration from the BPDX. So the obsession on the BPDX by people with codependency, please, if you don't realize this already, become aware of what you're really doing and why. Because a lot of people with codependency, like this man kind of illustrates, you're looking, he might not like this, he might not realize this, but so many people with codependency reverse hoovering a borderline X who's actually not bothering you and needed it to be over as well, or whatever the situation might be. What are you looking for and what are you doing? And part of what's being done in this situation, and with anybody with codependency who reverse hoovers the borderline X, it's all about what you need at that point. It's all about what you need in externalized validation, or did I do something wrong, or why did you just dump me, or whatever. It's all about then what the codependent needs, And people with BPD, unlike this person who spoke pretty plainly and not meanly, usually will punish you for it. So this is why full no contact is so important, because don't kid yourself. If you're reverse hoovering your borderline ex, or you're allowing them to hoover you, and then you're only responding, which, like I said in the video before, that's not no contact. You need to go, or I'm out here to work with you. If I resonate with you, I will keep it real. I mean, I'm a lot more gentle in sessions. I hope I wasn't like ungentle here, or I didn't mean any disrespect to the commenter, but it's an opportunity to point out, based on this man's experience and how he's clearly not understanding what he's looking for, and that it's not all on the borderline. In this case, people with codependency have to stop obsessing on the borderline, because so much of what you've experienced with them, and I'm not defending their behavior or anything, when they're really treating you horrible, which I don't think this BPDX was treating this guy horrible or horribly. The bottom line is, people with codependency are seeking validation outside of self too. It's part of the woundedness. It's what it started in childhood, and you need to take responsibility for that. You need to own your codependent needs. And that's why I work with clients, among many other reasons, after these relationship breakups, which are among the most difficult of all relationship breakups. And you need to heal from that. But there's something unconsciously driving this man to contact, reverse hoover his BPDX, who's clearly saying, I can't let's just end it. I can't. And they're broken up. And he keeps on. So why is that okay? How is that not boundary breaking to the person with BPD, which in a lot of cases maybe that wouldn't fit to say, but when the person with BPD isn't being mean or abusive to this BPDX codependent recontacting, see, he's feeling entitled to recontact her, to reverse hoover. So you have to really think about, like I've said before, so many people with codependency are needing something from that person with BPD. More to the point, it's who they represent from your childhood as well. And you need to get into that healing recovery work to figure all that out, to be able to really process it, to be able to really heal it, to be able to really stop obsessing on a BPDX. And it's not always all about the borderline. And yes, codependence, you have, maybe the way the relationship ended, you still don't get it, and it's all on the borderline. But you have to be responsible for you now, that what are you going to do with the reality of what is, even if it's crazy and you don't understand it. So people with codependency need to be aware that you too are seeking validation from outside yourself. You're in a world of hurt, and no contact is so important. And this commenter is projecting things onto the person with BPD who actually wasn't being mean or acting entitled. It was the codependent reverse hoovering person that was, I'm not saying being mean, but very entitled and not leaving the ex alone as she'd asked to be left alone. So this person needs more therapy to deal with their codependent issues without going back and hoovering, who really calmly, as stated by the person with codependency, whose ex it is, really calmly said things that clearly this man couldn't maybe stand or take in, or it wasn't feeding what he needed in something being reflected back to him. So I just think it's really important to keep it real on both sides of this fence. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you relate. It's very painful. Maybe I'll get some angry comments. Whatever you feel, leave some comments below about what you think, because I'm sure so many of you can relate to this, but maybe your BPDX is really super mean to you if you reverse hoover, and like in the situation like with this commenter. But in this situation, I see that the commenter is the one who's still playing out the issues of the codependency and of not going full no contact and of looking for something and his own validation from the BPDX. So codependence, you have a lot of work to do You can't blame everything on the borderline. They're responsible for lots often, right? But you can't blame everything on them, because if you're not doing well after a breakup and you want to reverse hoover them and you want to get them back and all this stuff, and they clearly, some of them don't clearly know, and maybe they'll hoover you and whatever, but the relationship recycling is never a healthy thing and it doesn't work out. So I just wanted to do this video as an educational video. No disrespect to this commenter, but I think this commenter has a few things to learn about what he's doing and then projecting onto his BPDX. Codependents have responsibility that they need to take for themselves to get into healing recovery, to learn and to grow, and to be able to get to full no contact. Take care.